Hi, my name is Todd Pletcher. I'm a studio potter from Goshen, Indiana. Okay, so now we've got our glazes mixed and we are ready to start actually dipping the pieces. Before we do that, there's a couple things we want to take a look at. First, if your work is not freshly bisqued, if it's been on a shelf for a while, there's a chance it's picked up some dust, and we want to make sure that the surface is as clean as we can before we actually dip it into the glaze bucket. This can be done a number of ways. At home, I have an air compressor and I spray dust off of all the pots before I glaze them. If you don't have access to an air compressor, you can certainly use a sponge and some water and simply sponge the surface clean. You will want to be careful. You can see the pot has picked up a little moisture. Just make sure you give it time to dry before you dip it into the bucket. Any moisture picked up by the clay prior to going into the bucket will leave it with an uneven, thin coat. So once your pots are cleaned, we can go on to the next step, which will be waxing. It's very important that no glaze is ever on the bottom of a ceramic piece being fired. It will essentially turn to glass and fuse it to your kiln shelf. So we want to make sure we get it as clean as possible. One of the easiest ways to do that is to apply a thin layer of wax resist onto the bottom of a piece. You can see on this finished cup that the glaze stops right at the edge of the foot. We're going to wax that out so that we don't have to wipe any glaze off at the end. So you can simply take your wax resist, make sure it's mixed up thoroughly, and go ahead, grab a brush, and brush a generous coat onto the foot of your piece. Try to make sure you don't drip any wax onto the side of your pot. You only want it to maintain the areas on the foot. So now we're ready to dip our piece into the glaze. This first step, I'm going to show you how to glaze with glaze tongs. These are roughly $10 at ceramic supply stores and are a very handy tool for dipping pots into a glaze. Simply going to grip the piece near the top or about halfway down. And we're going to submerge the piece completely into the glaze bucket, hold for about a 5 count, and then come back out. The amount of water we've added to these glazes make it a consistency that about 5 seconds usually does the trick. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Try to be smooth. As you can see, the wax resist has kept the glaze from sticking too much to the foot. Set it on the table, and with both hands, release the tongs. Alright, after your piece has had some time to dry, go ahead and clean off any glaze that beaded up on the foot of your piece. Just use a damp sponge and sort of gently wash that off. Just want to make sure that any remaining glaze is cleaned off. That'll make the piece look nice and finished and ensure that it's not going to stick down to the kiln shelves during the firing.